Cavalcade.
Hello, I'm Ed Bruce at the start-finish line of the Nashville International Raceway in my hometown of Nashville, Tennessee. You know, in many ways, this track is representative of the backbone of stock car racing across the country, the short track. It was on tracks like this of a quarter to a half mile in length that many of today's top drivers learned their trade and sharpened their skills. Even with the addition of today's super speedways, the short track still offers the fans some of the most exciting action and the drivers a little more to contend with. Today, my pals Brock Yates and Steve Evans are standing by up in Winchester, Indiana. They'll be bringing you the American Speed Association's late model stock car, Winchester 400. This is a grueling test for all the drivers on the Winchester half-mile oval. And a little later on, I'll introduce you to a man who made quite a name for himself on short tracks. As one of the best men behind the wheel, retired stock car driver Cuckoo Marlin will join me to reminisce about his famous career. But right now, let's join Steve and Brock for today's Winchester 400.
Thank you, Ed, and welcome everyone to the Winchester 400 in Winchester, Indiana, the most famous ASA professional stock car race of them all. The cars are right now completing their pace lap pageantry. On the pole is Dick Trickle. Brock Yates. Dick has won more stock car races, short track races, than any other driver ever, but he's never won here.
That's right. And it is the most difficult race on this ASA trail. It's the fastest half-mile track in the world, Steve. They're going to get around here in about 14 seconds. Very high banked and a very dangerous racetrack.
Indeed it is, and I will tell you what, with real race cars going into these tight 36-degree bank turns at 140 miles an hour, anything can happen.
And often does, Steve. They call this place the Black Widow. It's one of the oldest racetracks in the United States. In fact, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway just down the road and this place are one of two racetracks that date back to before World War I. And of course, the banks are 36 degrees, which makes them steeper than Daytona, Talladega, and a lot of other high bank racetracks in the United States, and plenty dangerous.
Well, the problem is, Brock, when you put this kind of banking on a half-mile racetrack, a lot of the times you're driving blind. An incident that happens in turn 2, you don't even see until you drive right into the middle of it.
Absolutely right. Just visibility almost zero. It's like driving into a wall all the way around those corners as we see the field coming down on their pace lap. This is a tradition with American Speed Association starts. You'll see the starter out there. He's doing a kind of a bullfighter act as the cars come down and then they dodge him and get into line 2 by 2 to set up for the start.
Well, starter John Potts doesn't really think he's the famous bullfighter Manolete. He just has an awful lot of faith in these drivers, and it's not the first time they've done this. What a good-looking bunch of stock cars, Brock, primarily Camaros and Firebirds.
Right, Steve, and they're built to a very specific formula. We'll talk a little bit more about that. It's designed to keep the competition high and the cost down, and it seems to be working. As you can see, a whole bunch of really nice automobiles ready to get ready for the start here, and led by a bunch of big stars that the ASA has created. That's one of the advantages of running in a league like this. Dick Trickle, maybe the winningest short track stock car driver in history. His so-called Super America Camaro number 99 is one of the most famous stock cars in the United States, although it's never gotten into the victory lane here in the Winchester 400.
But in the second row is a man who has won this race before, Mike Eddy. In fact, that was 2 years ago. He came from the second position that particular year to win. Bob Seneker, back in row number 4, has won this race 4 times, all in the late 70s.
Got some young, hot Grand National stock car prospects in the field, Rusty Wallace and Mark Martin, both of whom have run very well in Grand National competition. And, of course, there are a bunch of other young fellows here that are dreaming about running in the Grand National ranks. But right now, it's Winchester 400 time, and these automobiles, Steve, as we said earlier, are mighty interesting in terms of the rules that they run under.
Well, first of all, Brock, appearance-wise, they have to maintain the stock body shape, with the exception of the front air dam and the rear spoiler for safety and handling reasons. They are limited to 9.5-1 compression maximum and a 390 CFM 4-barrel carburetor, a rather small carburetor. And all of this is to lend reliability and hopefully keep down the cost of racing.
And the engine limit, 355 cubic inches, 2,800-pound limit. Earlier, Steve had a chance to talk about another rule that's very critical in ASA racing.
In ASA stock car racing, all of the cars use exactly the same tire. It's one of the rules that was created to hopefully reduce the cost of racing and increase the competition. This tire happens to be from Goodyear. In fact, they're the only ones that make it. Its part number is 3311. And having looked at a lot of racing tires in my career, I can tell you it's a good deal harder than most of them. It doesn't get quite the traction, but then again, everybody is using the same tire. Also, being a bit harder, these tires are going to last a good deal longer. There's another ASA rule. The tire has to retail for under $100. This one is like $84.60. And if you've priced radials for your passenger car lately, you know that's very reasonable indeed.
It sure is, Steve, and the object here is to keep the cost down and the competition high, and that's exactly what we're going to see as John Potts, the chief flagman here at Winchester, signals one more lap. So the pace car is going to bring him around. Bob Strait on the outside of row one. He's ready. He's out of Flossmoor, Illinois. Mike Eddy, we said earlier, a former winner here, Midland, Michigan, one of the real heavy-duty stars in this kind of racing. Harold Fair, Livonia, Michigan, another strong runner in ASA. Bobby Dowder, Chicago, Illinois, inside of row three. And running out of Wayland, Michigan, on the outside of row three, we have Terry Seneker.
And starting in the 12th position is Rusty Wallace, who won this race a year ago, coming from 13th. So even though he didn't qualify all that well, don't count out number 66. That also a Camaro. We're just about ready to go racing here, Brock, as the field starts to pick up the pace, coming through turn 3. In fact, they are already racing before they get to turn number 4.
Right, Steve, and that's Bob Strait in that blue Camaro down low. He ducked underneath Dick Trickle up high as they come off of turn 2. That's Mike Eddy right behind in the first 3 automobiles, and they're racing.
Even though Trickle had the pole position, he elected to start on the outside rather than the usual inside. This is an unusual racetrack. It demands some strange philosophies.
It sure does. Right now, though, that cost him the lead in the early laps as Bob Strait holds on. In fact, moves out to about a 4-car length lead over Dick Trickle. Right behind Trickle, we got Mike Eddy, and immediately back of him, the former Rookie of the Year in ASA, Harold Fair, in another Camaro. So we've got 3 Camaros and Mike Eddy's Firebird up front.
Well, Mike Eddy, the winner here in 1981, car number 88, is pulled up alongside. Dick Trickle is going to challenge for that second position down low.
Well, passing low is the way to work here at Winchester. It's very difficult to pass up against the fence, so you'll see Eddy work on Dick Trickle down low. Right then, that pass didn't work, but he's going to try him again. You can be sure of that as the 3 leaders sweep off turn 4 and head down the main straightaway. Right now, though, it's Bob Strait in that Camaro holding on to a good, strong lead. And here comes Eddy again, moving on Trickle.
Well, Eddy is a strong guy, Brock. He likes to run up front. There's no strategy when it comes to his racing, particularly here at Winchester. Get out front and stay there is what Eddy wants to do.
Well, Mike has won 4 ASA championships and has, as you said earlier, won this race. He's known as the polar bear. He's just a big, strong, beefy man and a lot of physical strength. And, of course, that helps in a race like this. This is going to be just all turns, really, here in a high-bank speedway like Winchester. So it does take a lot of physical stamina. And we've got a car in the fence there in turn 2.
That is car number 23, Larry Cope, who is tangled apparently with car number 7, Don Gregory. And that is going to bring out an instant yellow flag. Doesn't appear to be that much damage to either race car, though, Brock.
Well, we've got a 3rd car involved. That's John Wilson out of Springfield, Ohio. So 3 disabled automobiles on the racetrack here at Winchester. Bob Strait leads it. We'll be back after this.
We're under yellow after only a few laps of the Winchester 400 here in Winchester, Indiana. I'm Steve Evans along with Brock Yates and our host Ed Bruce, who's at his home track in Nashville, Tennessee. He'll be joining us from time to time. This is one of the drivers that created the yellow flag, Don Gregory, car number 7. The crew hoping to still get it back into the race. And under yellow, out on the point, is Bob Strait, car number 1.
And sitting in 2nd place, Mike Eddy in that Firebird. He squeezed past Dick Trickle on the early laps to take 2nd place. So we've got everybody's closed in, Steve, and it looks like we're going to get a green.
We have got a green, and watch Mike Eddy. Eddy is in a perfect position. He is down low and can take straight into turn number 1 if it works right. And it does. Mike Eddy, I said earlier he likes to run up front. Well, there he is side by side with Bob Strait.
Well, this is a good little racetrack, as you can see. It's a 2-groove track. Those guys are running side by side around here, but Mike Eddy makes it work. Down low. Now, and notice he's staying low, Steve. That automobile is really handling. That's a good sign of a race car that's really working on these banks if you can run low. So Mike Eddy hangs on, but here comes Strait again. He's going to try him low the same way that he lost the lead. Right back there in third place is Dick Trickle, and behind him is Harold Fair. Those four cars seem to be breaking out a little bit from the rest of the field.
Well, Mike Eddy's go for broke driving style has already earned him over $70,000 this year on the ASA scene.
And he looks like he's got the kind of power at this particular point to run out front. He started back in third place, but went right by first Trickle and then Strait to take the lead. So we've got Mike Eddy, but boy, I'll tell you what, Strait's not going to give up at all. He is right on his bumper, and I'm sure he's going to try a pass here pretty quickly.
And on this racetrack, Brock, you're not just watching the car or two cars in front of you. You're using your peripheral vision as much as possible. Because as you come into turn number one, let's say, you're trying to see the exit of turn two in case there's a problem. Because if you don't see it, you have no time to avoid it.
Well, more than that, Steve, you're never free of traffic. This is a 31-car field. Everybody is just spread out all around this half mile, so you're never really clear of anything. And it takes an awful lot of strategy on the part of the leader to weave his way through the slower automobiles, because if he gets balked for just a second, a guy like Strait or even Trickle is right past old Mike Eddy. So right now, Eddy's into the traffic, and he's a very experienced driver, and he's weaving his way through effectively. But now he's got three slower cars ahead of him, and this could be a chance for Strait to catch up. The tactic here on a short track like this is for the slower cars to drop down lower and let the fast guys by on the outside, which those slower fellows have done.
Well, Mike Eddy, we mentioned earlier, is physically strong, and he's going to need all of that strength today, Brock. Can you imagine driving 400 laps on the Black Widow? I can't.
No power steering, no air conditioning, Steve. Here's a car in trouble. That's Mickey Flora, and one of the very few Fords in this particular field. That's a Mustang, and it looks like he's got a blown engine. Whatever. They brought out the caution as Mickey brings his race car down into the pits for work.
Well, they want to make sure there's no oil anywhere on the racetrack, Brock, particularly on this track. If you got any oil out there, it's just a disaster. There's no way to avoid it.
So they'll form the cars up behind the pace car and let the track officials go out and take a peek at the racing surface. As you said, if oil gets into the groove on a high-speed short track like this, it's nothing but disaster. So here comes the pace car, followed by Mike Eddy and Bob Strait right back there in second place, ready for a restart. So as we wait for the green to come out, let's go to Steve Evans, who had an earlier report on the technical sophistication of these cars.
The suspension on these cars is as sophisticated as you'll find on any racing stock cars. Let's first take a look at the rear suspension. Okay, we have a quick change rear end section. In this case, the cover is off and the gears have been removed. This enables them to change gears very, very rapidly for changing track conditions or track distances. The shocks are of the coil-over variety. Disc brakes here, very, very heavy hubs. An anti-rollover bar here to add some stiffness. And with all the sophistication, what do you find but a chunk of hardware store chain? That is there for pit purposes. When they jack the car up, they don't have to take the time for the suspension to come all the way to the top. This chain makes it jack up instantly. Let's take a look at the front end of the car. At the front of the race car, we find the same style of heavy-duty hubs and disc brake we saw on the rear. The suspension really is tubular double A-arms, upper and lower. The difference here from a production car, number one, is they are tubular for strength, and they're also angled exactly opposite of a production car. Your car or mine is this way. They use a very, very heavy and adjustable coil-over shock on the front. And bear in mind, the right side of the suspension takes far more punishment than the left due to the high banks here at Winchester. Also adjustable and very, very important is the sway bar at the front of the automobile. You see these jam nuts on top, and there's one on the other side. They can adjust the push of the car for changing track conditions. All in all, simple, but still sophisticated and very, very strong.
These cars can be bought in kit form from manufacturers like Bemco and Dillon and Howe Enterprises, and they're very good race cars. In fact, they're not only used in short track competition, but you find them in road racing in series like the Trans Am and the Kelly American Cup. So there is all kinds of uses for these particular automobiles, Steve.
Well, he may be shy a right front fender, but number 71, John Wilson, who was involved in that earlier shunt, is back out on the racetrack. He started in the 14th row. Now he's dead last, and we have got to start. Mike Eddy on the outside, trying to take Bob Strait going into turn one, and he does it.
Well, Bob Strait got a little bit of a jump on him on the restart, and it looked as if he might grab first place back from Eddie, but Eddie's superior power apparently just hauled him into turn number 1, and now he's got himself about a 2-car length, a little bit more, actually, about 5 cars as they head down into turn number 2.
And you can see the grease sweep through turn number 1 and 2 that went down on the oil from that exploded engine. Eddie avoiding that.
Well, Mike Eddy's showing some really impressive horsepower right now, Steve. He just hauled Bob Strait after that restart and is now opening up on both Strait and Dick Turkle back there in 3rd place in that number 99 Camaro. And I'll tell you what, when you can pull Dick Turkle on any kind of a short track, you know you've got some horsepower and that your car is handling. As we watch Mike Eddy right up against the wall, come off turn 4 and just fly down the front straightaway. Probably knocking on, as you said, about 140 miles an hour, which is some kind of speed to generate on a little racetrack like this.
But really not enough speed, Brock, for drafting to be a practical strategy.
Right, Steve. It's really more handling. That is the factor here on these very tight, high bank corners at Winchester. 36 degrees. You can't even crawl up a bank like that.
It is indeed a tall mountain to climb for Mike Eddy as he comes out of turn 4 across the start-finish line, and there is a problem out on the racetrack, Brock. Car number 35, Buddy Schrock, has got an air hose hung over that rear spoiler. He was in the pit area for some tire work, and apparently somehow one of the air hoses got hung up on the race car.
Well, as you remember, Steve, Schrock was involved in that little crash in the opening lap, so they've been in there working on the car, and now, of course, the caution is out as Buddy is going to bring it back into the pits, and the crew is going to get a chance to untangle all that rubber.
Well, I doubt that he knows he's trailing a couple of snakes here, Brock.
I'm sure they're going to show him the black flag and say, Buddy, go on in there into the pits and get that thing sorted out. Actually, Buddy is one of the rising young stars in this league out of Plain City, Ohio. His dad ran an ASA before him, and a lot of people say he's destined for stardom. He started well up in the field today, but that earlier little tangle that he had and now the stop in the pits is going to put him back a bit, Steve.
Well, Buddy was reluctant at first to come into the pit area because it seemed that all was well from his vantage point, but as we can see, behind that car trails a black air hose that could be a problem not only for Buddy, but another competitor. So he is coming into the pit area to have it removed, and we'll be back with the restart.
The green is out and they're back racing as this man, Mike Eddy, leads it here at Winchester, Indiana on the high banks in the Winchester 400. Bob Strait back there in 2nd place. Dick Trickle, Bob Seneca, 2 of the great names in ASA competition, back there in 3rd and 4th with Harold Ferrer bringing up 5th place. But right now it's all Mike Eddy, Steve Evans.
Well, Eddy seems to be able to pull right away from Trickle and the rest, Brock, but those yellow flags keep coming out and allowing the competition to bunch up behind him.
Well, Steve, that's just a component of this particular kind of racing. There are a lot of yellow flags, and the drivers are pretty philosophical about it. They know that they're not really going to get it too big a lead until the yellow comes, and a guy like Mike Eddy has to be ready for a restart every once in a while, and a guy like Bob Strait has to hope he can take advantage of it.
Well, the guy that really has to be ready for a yellow is the starter, because the yellow flag gets a lot of exercise here at Winchester. I think they've been known to wear out a flag or 2 in a long race like this.
Got real strong right arms, don't they, waving those flags. But right now, Mike Eddy has himself a good, solid lead, maybe a quarter of a racetrack here.
Well, here's Eddy with 2 lap cars between himself and Bob Strait. Eddy across the start-finish line, heading down into turn number 1. Earlier, Brock had a chance to talk to Mike Eddy about this racetrack.
Mike, Winchester's got to be a special place. It's so old and so historical, but it's got to be just tough and hard on a driver, too.
Yeah, it's one of them type of racetracks that it's very demanding. It's got its blind spots. It's fast. All that makes it exciting.
Mike, what is the toughest part on the racetrack? Toughest in terms of both driver skill and also the most dangerous spots?
Well, I suppose the most dangerous spots is coming out of the corners, because going into the corners, you can't see what's going to be 100 foot in front of you. So when you're going 100 mile an hour, it comes up pretty fast, and you can get in trouble if you don't have a little luck.
So that's why you guys are using spotters, huh?
Yeah, if you have somebody around, they can, just an extra second warning would sometimes get you out of the trouble.
In the pit area, number 66, Rusty Wallace, the defending champion here at Winchester. He was struggling, was down 3 laps. Also coming in, number 84, Bob Seneca. And these are not scheduled stops, Brock.
Nor are they names to be discounted in the overall winner potential here, Steve. Seneca, for example, won this thing 5 years in a row. So he's got to be disappointed, because you make an extended stop here in a race like this and you're in deep trouble.
But also, when we say a guy is 3 laps down, that's not like saying you're 3 laps down at Talladega. We're dealing in rather short laps here.
That's right. They're getting around here in under 15 seconds in race conditions. And you can see the clock is running on Bob Seneca, his crew chief, talking to him in the automobile. And it looks like they've got some serious problems with that car. As we see Bob Strait sweeping around turn number 1 out of turn 2. He's holding on to second place. But right now, it's Mike Eddy who seems to be dominating this competition here at Winchester.
Oh, Dennis Vogel in car number 51 just came up and rammed the back end of Bob Strait's car. Just rammed right into him. And now we've got yet another car in trouble, car number 33. And that brings out the yellow once again.
That's Ken Harrison out of Indianapolis, Indiana. He just looped it coming down off of turn 4 and ending up on the infield grass. It looks like the car isn't very severely damaged, and in fact, he's going to get it back underway. It may be that the big loser in that little incident was Bob Strait, who perhaps got some body damage, but in the meantime, the field is under yellow, and there is a flurry of pit activity. That's Bob Seneca's car. He's been in for a while. He's out of the automobile, and the crew is having a look at the rear end of the automobile. It could be transmission or rear end problems, maybe a suspension difficulty, but Seneca himself, who's also the chief mechanic on the car, working, and that, in fact, is Bob Strait. He may have been damaged a bit in that little shunt, Steve.
Well, in that the yellow flag is out also, Strait maybe just playing it cool and careful, Brock, to come in and have a look at the automobile. He was in very quickly, back out under yellow. He can make up that time he just lost.
A lot of cars in the pits. Rusty Wallace back in for a tire change. You said earlier he was down a few laps, in fact 3 laps down, and this isn't going to hurt him a whole lot though. Now, the pits here at Winchester are very restricted. An awful lot of traffic in here, and there's Bob Seneca still working on that car. It looks like it's gears. You can see one of his crewmen up, in fact a couple of them up there working on the drivetrain somewhere, where maybe the transmission, maybe the rear end, but whatever. Bob Seneca is in a lot of trouble, and it's unfortunate, as you said earlier, a big winner here in the Winchester 400, now sidelined.
The winningest driver ever, in fact, in the long, long history of this race. And also back in the pits again, Bob Strait.
Well, they're changing the left side tires this time for Bob Strait, so that's the second stop, and that's going to hurt him a little bit as he gets back underway here at Winchester, and is now balked a little bit by another car going out of the pits. Very congested here, a lot of traffic in and out of the pits for these routine stops under yellow. Okay, before a green flag, let's go down to Nashville with Ed Bruce and his guest.
Thanks, Brock. I'm sitting at the Nashville International Raceway with Cuckoo Marlin from Columbia, Tennessee, who I guess kind of helped rebuild this track a couple of times. It's a lot different from what you started out, isn't it?
Yes, it's a lot different, of course. Starting, you know, when you're on dirt, I guess you got to follow dust and you got to cross the car up. You use a quicker stern on dirt than you do on asphalt. Asphalt, you got to keep a car smooth, and you can't slide one because it heats the tires up. And of course, on dirt, you actually slung a car and drove the accelerator, and plus used the sling to help brake it.
Now, in those days on dirt tracks, of course, you didn't have the super speedways. Speeds were down a little bit from what we've become accustomed to. Did they draft in those days?
No, it wasn't no drafting. You just kind of followed the heavy part of the dust, then you knew you was in a racetrack. So sometimes people have went off a turn following the heavy part of the dust.
Thanks, Cuckoo. Let's go back to Brock and Steve at the Winchester 400.
Well, we got no heavy dust here, but we got some heavy metal. And here's our leader, car number 88, Mike Eddy, taking advantage of that yellow flag that is still out to get his pit work accomplished, Brock Yates.
Right, Steve, and that will be a routine stop. They're going to change the right side rubber. That, of course, is the side that gets all the wear here on this 36-degree banking in Winchester, Indiana. So, Eddy, a routine stop. That is Bobby Dotter. He is also in. He's riding in third place. 23-year-old son of a former race driver out of the Midwest. Bobby Dotter, a real comer in ASA competition as his crew goes to work. And now, Mike Eddy's crew wipes down the back window on his number 88 car as Bobby Dowder gets underway. Mike Eddy will be starting here to resume his race as well, but of course he will have lost the lead during the stop.
Well, the stops are rather leisurely when they're confident that yellow's going to stay out for a while, and you can see all the powder there in turn one. It'll be a while before it's swept up.
Dick Trickle in now. That number 99 car, as we've said, one of the most famous short track cars in the country. His crew, Dick Trickle, a real wit, a funny man, got a very dry sense of humor, drives over 100 races a year, Steve, all around the United States. A real traveling professional.
And Trickle, a family man, makes his living, supports that family with his ASA racing.
He sure does, and very successfully so. He may not be a guy that has the big name like a Richard Petty, for example, in stock car racing, but the people in the Midwest in particular know that Trickle is one of the very best race drivers in the country.
He's also a race promoter's dream, Brock, because he'll come in a few days early, work with the television, the newspaper, spreading the good word about short track stock car racing. Good athlete.
Sure is, Steve, and a good engineer like Bob Seneker knows a lot about chassis setups. Here's a change here. This is Bob Sensibah's car, number 48. They're getting a new driver stuffed in there. Sensibah out, and Mark Martin, the young star, is getting into that car. It's a little unusual to have a driver change in this kind of competition. Steve Evans is down there to find out why.
Bob, just why have you put Mark Martin in your race car?
Just they got the headers routed wrong, and it's awful hot in there. And I figured instead of getting wore out, there's somebody else available, put him in for a while.
You're a sensible man. Will you get back in later?
Yeah.
Good luck to you.
Thank you.
So we stay under the yellow here in the Winchester 400, and the flurry of pit stops has given this young man, the car number 80, Alan Kulwicki of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, the lead.
We are just moments away from a green flag restart of the Winchester 400 here in Winchester, Indiana. I'm Steve Evans, along with Brock Yates and our buddy Ed Bruce, who will be visiting with us from time to time from Nashville International Speedway. Brock, the green flag is out, and thanks to a flurry of pit stops, our leader is number 80, Alan Kulwicki.
Indeed, but the man is challenging him right now as Bob Strait has run up in the second spot all day long. Kulwicki in one of the older model Camaros now being challenged by that pretty blue Camaro of Bob Strait's, and down underneath Kulwicki he goes, and it could be he'll make that stick. Yep, it looks like he does. Yes, he gets down underneath Kulwicki going into turn one, and now our new leader is Bob Strait. Strait, you know, was the Rookie of the Year here in ASA in 1979, Steve, and is a very much of an up-and-coming young driver in this business.
In fact, last year was his best season ever among the ASA ranks. Mike Eddy, who you recall was leading before that flurry of pit stops, is now back in the middle of the pack and trying to charge through.
And I got a feeling he's going to charge through the way that car was running. Unless he's had some problems that we don't know about, Eddy is still the man to be reckoned with in this event, as Bob Strait right now is opening up a pretty solid lead on Alan Kulwicki. Kulwicki, once, as I mentioned earlier, he's a graduate engineer, a solid young talent in this field, has in this particular race maybe not quite as competitive an automobile as some of the other guys, but Kulwicki is very definitely a young star in ASA ranks. Won some big races, and I'm sure will win some more big ones as his career progresses, especially good in the technical side of the business. A lot of these drivers, I mentioned earlier that Dick Trickle and Bob Seneker have real talent in the technical side. This young man also, Mike Eddy, in addition to being a very strong and a very competitive race driver, very aggressive driver, is also very good with chassis. And believe it or not, it takes a lot of skill to set these automobiles up so they handle right.
Well, Mike Eddy is already back up into the third spot. You've got a lap car in there, Rusty Wallace, that makes him appear to be in fourth, but in reality, he is in third and moving.
He sure is, Steve, and it's this man, Alan Kulwicki, who's got to be looking over his shoulder at Mike Eddy, because he's going to move up on him as soon as Rusty Wallace gets out of the way, which Rusty will. He's being lapped, and he's not going to contest Mike Eddy for that particular position. So Rusty Wallace in the number 66 drops down low, and now Mike Eddy right up on the bumper of Alan Kulwicki, and a clean shot for second place, Steve.
So Bob Strait in the blue car is leading. Right behind him is the orange older Camaro in the second spot, and Mike Eddy closing in on both of them.
So it's a three-car race for the lead. Mike Eddy down low, but his way is blocked by that slower automobile, so he's got to get out of the throttle and duck back into line as they come down the front straightaway, and in fact lost a little bit on that move. That is where traffic becomes such a factor in this kind of short track racing, Steve. So we got a 3-car race for the lead. Strait, Kulwicki, and Mike Eddy, who is now just banging bumpers with Kulwicki back there in that 3rd spot.
Well, what he's going to try to do is set him up to get down low, and here it goes. Can he get both of them in one fell swoop? Can he get either one of them in one fell swoop?
Well, he's sure going to try. He's got a clean line down low, so he's got Kulwicki, it looks like, and who's to know? Yes, up into 2nd place goes Mike Eddy. That automobile is handling so well down low that it just seems to be a matter of time before he reels in Bob Strait for the lead. But then again, we saw him try earlier on Kulwicki and not make it, so it may happen as well that the traffic factor will again play a role here and permit Bob Strait to hold on to the lead. Right now, they're getting into some slower lap traffic, and that could hold up Mike Eddy's bid for the lead.
Well, that lap traffic is a plus for both Strait and Kulwicki, the 1st and 3rd place cars, because if Mike Eddy ever gets clear sailing, Brock, he's going to be gone like a rocket.
Well, it's unlikely, though, that you're ever going to get a really clear track here on a half-mile like Winchester. There's always going to be somebody drifting around out there in this fast lane, so it's a good opportunity, and of course, it's a very evening factor that you get in racing like this. Nobody ever really gets that far out front. But right now, Mike Eddy just has his sights set on that blue rear bumper of Bob Strait's. But interestingly enough, Steve, it looks like Strait can run with him down the back straightaway, but it's in the corners that Mike Eddy just runs underneath them.
No question about it, Brock. Mike Eddy has the superior handling automobile, and it may pay off for him right now.
Well, there's another lap car right up there in front of him, though. But Mike Eddy does make it stick down the back straightaway. He just ducks up in between. And look at this. Kulwicki made a move on Strait as well. I wonder if he can make it hold for 2nd place.
Just for an instant there, Kulwicki had his bumper tucked right in there for that 2nd spot, but now has drifted back in behind Bob Strait, the blue car.
Well, of course, the problem is when you make a bid down low and don't get by, you scrub off enough speed so you fall back. But right now, Kulwicki tries it again, down low, and it looks like Strait doesn't give way, so it remains Mike Eddy, Bob Strait, and Kulwicki back there in 3rd place. But boy, he's not giving up.
And look at the distance already that Mike Eddy in the left side of your screen has put between the blue car and the orange car running 2nd and 3rd. That's Strait and Kulwicki.
So right now it's a 1-car race, but Kulwicki and Strait are really going at it for 2nd spot. Right behind him is Rusty Wallace, but he's not a factor. He's a few laps down, but he's staying right with the guys. And there goes Kulwicki. It looks like Strait got a little wide, a little bit high up near the fence, had to back out of it, and Kulwicki makes it stick for 2nd place.
You know, that really shouldn't happen, all things considered, Brock. I have a feeling that Bob Strait has got some problems with that automobile. That number 80 Camaro, and no disrespect, but it's an older automobile, and it should really not be as competitive as we see it right now, as far as comparing it to Strait's car. Anyway, in fact, here comes Strait into the pit area.
Right. You're absolutely right. Bob just slowed way, way down. It could be tires. It is tires, certainly at least part of the problem. They're going to change the right side. This is a big, big disaster for Bob Strait. This is under green, and these guys are going around here in about 15 seconds under race conditions. That means that at a minimum, he's going to lose 2 or 3 laps before he gets underway. That's a tough break for a guy that has just run so well all afternoon. Good quick pit stop, though. Took on fuel and fresh right side rubber, so he's back underway. But this man, Mike Eddy, way, way out in front. No real challengers right now. He's put a lot of distance on 2nd place Alan Kulwicki, and his major rival in the event, Bob Strait, has to make an unscheduled pit stop for a failing tire. Too bad for Bob Strait, but a big break for Mike Eddy.
And Mike Eddy right now just hopes that the track stays green, Brock, because he's being able to really build up a lead.
He sure has, Steve, but we got a really good race for 3rd place. That's Bob Dowder in that yellow number 79 Firebird, followed by the red 81 Camaro of Harold Fair. Those guys just at it all day long. They started in 4th and 5th spots and have stayed with the leaders all day.
And the white car number 40, who's in the middle of all of this, is Terry Sineker. Terry is running in the 9th spot right now, a lap down.
And look at this, Steve, a big change. Harold Fair moved past Dodder and now moves past Kulwicki in the orange number 80 Camaro, who's falling way, way back. He's got problems.
We saw the rear end of car 80 get real loose, Brock. He got right off of the throttle, and boy, that cost him a bunch of positions.
It sure did. I've got a feeling that he may be having tire problems just like we saw Bob Strait have. So, your leader, Mike Eddy, Harold Fair now up into 2nd place, Bobby Dodder 3rd, Trickle and Kulwicki up into 4th and 5th. Trickle now becoming a factor in the race, and poor Alan Kowicki in 2nd place now all the way back down into 4th. Bob Straight into the pits once again. The hood off the car. That's a chassis adjustment that they're making with that automobile. He falls farther back here in the Winchester 400 after starting 2nd.
How quickly your fortunes can change in short track stock car racing. Number 80, Alan Kowicki, who was leading this race not that long ago, is now in jeopardy of having a full lap put on him. Here is the leader, car number 88, Mike Eddy, trying to get around Kowicki. Kowicki's car suddenly got about 20 feet wide, and Eddy's having a problem. But if he does get around him, it will put Kowicki one lap down. There's got to be problems with that Camaro, Brock Yates.
I would think it's something in the chassis, Steve. He seems to have plenty of speed on the straights, but all of a sudden Kowicki just dropped way, way back. It could be something like a broken shock or a broken sway bar or maybe a tire going down on him, but it sure has affected the handling of that automobile. He just suddenly dropped back. In fact, he's spinning right in front of Mike Eddy. Wow!
I cannot believe that a half a dozen race car drivers were all able to get onto the brakes, hang onto those race cars, collect them up. No contact was made. Incredible.
What a beautiful piece of driving by Kowicki. He lost the car, and as you're supposed to do, cramped the wheel to the left and just ground looped it and put it right back on the racetrack. Never touched a thing. Mike Eddy right on his bumper, spiked the brakes. He stayed out of trouble. Let's look at that again. What a beautiful piece of driving here on these 36-degree banks.
Well, the rear end of the car gets loose. Right now, he knows he's in trouble, spikes the brakes, Brock, and as you said, goes full lock with the steering wheel.
Around the car comes a full 360. Smoke just pouring off those tires. He's going to definitely flat spot those babies.
Also a textbook drive by Mike Eddy, who made no evasive maneuvers, just stayed in a straight line with hard brakes, and it worked for everybody.
Sure did. The philosophy there being that drive where the spinning car is, and by the time you get there, he will have gone someplace else, and it worked.
And also, anytime you get on the brakes as hard as Mike Eddy did, you can bet you're going to flat spot a tire. So with the yellow out, Eddy dashes into the pits for a clean windshield and some fresh rubber. And remember, all of these guys run exactly the same type of tire, the same compound, all bought from the same tire company. But you can have an unlimited supply in the pit area. There's no rule against that. So Mike Eddy is going to lose his lead with this particular stop. But the way Eddy has been charging out on that racetrack, I don't think that's a big concern to him right now. Eddy with a good stop and back out onto the racetrack. He'll go to fall in line behind the pace car. Let's again go to Nashville International Speedway and Ed Bruce.
Thank you, Steve. Cuckoo, we look around us at races today and we see all the big, fancy, sophisticated rigs with the cars and the trailers and tire racks and all that. How did you get to races in the old short tracks, dirt tracks when you started?
Well, of course, back then we used tow bars, and we drop out the back axles and tow on the racetrack. Of course, I have seen time we drove them to the racetrack. One time, we took a Hudson Hornet from here in Nashville with 2 straight exhausts on it and drove to Cade, Alabama. And of course, no roll bars. You just strapped up the doors and taped up headlights, and you're ready to race.
Did you win the race?
I think I wound up 3rd. And of course, just like before the race started, we drove and got the Cup service, a hamburger offside the car. Of course, there's 2 or 3 cars sitting around there in the Cup service.
Did you drive the car back home after the race?
I drove it back home. Of course, had a few scratches on it. We just pull the tape off and drive it back home.
Thanks, Cuckoo. We'll talk some more later about the early days of short track, dirt track racing. Right now, let's go back to Brock and Steve at the Winchester 400.
Thanks, Ed. And the yellow still flies here at Winchester as we see Harold Fair now moving into the lead after that flurry that put Mike Eddy into the pits. Dick Trickle up into 2nd place, and Butch Miller, he's a new face up into 3rd as the green flies now, and we've got Harold Fair in that red number 81 Camaro leading the way. Right behind him in that number 99, the very familiar car, Dick Trickle right in behind him. But somewhere back in that field is a man named Eddy, Steve Evans, and he's got to be coming hard.
And there's thousands of eyes on Mike Eddy right now. We saw him do it earlier, coming from the middle of the pack to first in a matter of a half a dozen laps. Harold Fair may be leading it, but back in 4th spot and moving up is number 88, Mike Eddy. So with all of the incidents we've seen in the racetrack and the number of yellow flags, it's enabled at least some other drivers besides Mike Eddy to lead this, Brock Yates. This is Harold Fair's first time out on the point, and he's enjoying it.
It sure is. That's Butch Miller back there in third place, about to give way to that beautiful brown and yellow number 88 of Mike Eddy. You know, he's been driving for this same team, the Menning brothers, for 6 seasons. So he and the guys that build an automobile really know each other, and you can be sure they got it tuned up.
Well, this is the race for the lead. Number 81, Harold Fair, and number 99, Dick Trickle. Trickle in the white machine, Fair in the bright red car as they get around the lap of Rusty Wallace.
Rusty drops down low. Once again, Rusty, a little bit of a surprise here because he's kind of way down because of some stops, but when the car's right, he's obviously able to run with the leaders.
And Brock, apparently they have remedied some of his problems because he was 4 laps down at one point and has now picked up 2 of those, just 2 down.
So it could be, as the race progresses, that Rusty could become a factor again. Right now, though, it still is Harold Fair, right behind him Dick Trickle, and just in back of them in that little cluster of traffic is a man named Mike Eddy.
And part of that traffic, Brock, namely number 66, Rusty Wallace, is preventing Mike Eddy from getting the shot at Dick Trickle he'd like to have.
Well, Rusty says, you aren't going to accuse me of blocking anybody, Steve. I'm moving out of the way. And here comes Mike Eddy right up on Dick Trickle's bumper and about to challenge for that number 2 spot. It could be, in fact, that he'll make his move going down into turn 3. He's done that before, but this time it looks like he's going to sit up there a little bit. Trickle moved down too to prevent that low pass by Mike Eddy. So now he goes high to move around Dick Trickle up on the high side. So there they are, nose to nose down the back straightaway with Mike Eddy holding on just a little bit. And now Dick Trickle's way down low on the racetrack, going to try it low, and will it work?
Well, they've also right now got Mike Eddy boxed in there, Brock. His handling is so superior, though, that I don't think that's going to last very long.
But look at the horsepower Dick Trickle's showing down low. He did hang right in there down that back straightaway, but look at this move. 4 cars, and Mike Eddy suddenly is challenging Harold Fair for the overall lead here. In fact, let's see what happens down this back straightaway. Unless Dick Trickle can move in on him, it could be that Eddy will try Harold Fair low and possibly take the lead.
Well, Mike Eddy is going to dive down low now, Brock. This is one of his favorite places to pass, going into turn number 1. Harold Fair on the outside, Eddy down low, and Fair hangs on.
Wow, good race. But it's not going to work for poor Harold Fair. He just can't hold off Eddy any longer. Eddy's just relentless here at Winchester. Just keeps on coming like a freight train around and around and around. He runs high, he runs low, and not only does he handle well, he just got tons of horsepower. So it's Mike Eddy once again back in the lead here at the Winchester 400.
While we were away from Winchester, Indiana, there was another yellow flag causing some pit stops here in the Winchester 400, and that is, again, scrambled our leaderboard just a bit. Still on top is number 88, Mike Eddy. Butch Miller in car number 52 now has moved into the 2nd spot. Jim Souter, the highest place he's had so far in car number 5, is in 3rd. Then Kowicki and Dick Trickle have been in the thick of things all day long. I'm Steve Evans along with Brock Yates. And Brock, this is Butch Miller, number 52, the furthest up we've seen him so far.
Right, Steve. Like Mike Eddy, Butch is out of Michigan. A lot of these drivers are Michigan short track stars who come into the ASA ranks. As the green is out, and once again, Mike Eddy just powers it down into turn 1 and 2. But Butch Miller hangs on. But it's just a matter of time if, in fact, Mike Eddy holds form here that he's going to start pulling away from Butch Miller.
That is, if he can see through all the paper that's blown out on the racetrack, Brock. It's starting to look like a ticker tape parade, and that could be a problem in itself.
Absolutely right, Steve. If one of these cars picks up some of that trash across the radiator intake, it could cause some overheating problems. So that is a little bit of a surprise. Usually the racetracks will stay pretty clean, but it may be that the bowl configuration of Winchester just lets everything kind of settle down inside it and doesn't clean it out. But no matter. Mike Eddy not having any troubles with waste paper or even Butch Miller, for that matter, right now, holding a good, strong lead, and he's got himself a clear racetrack ahead. Butch Miller in that white number 52, hanging on, though, just driving his heart out. Butch is a small man, kind of very diminutive, an interesting contrast between Mike Eddy, who, as we said earlier, is just a real fullback kind of a driver. but Butch is small and probably may be feeling a little bit of the fatigue here at Winchester.
That's possible, Brock. He's been driving the wheels off this car to move up from 12th to 2nd. A terrific race going on for the 3rd place position. The blue car of Jim Souter, number 5. Souter gets wide, and down underneath him comes number 80, Alan Kawicki. Kawicki had been having his own set of problems, Brock, but apparently his pit crew did a good job of finding their handling problem.
Sure did, but Sauter really had himself a scare. He got way up against the fence and almost lost the car, and now he seems to be slowing down. Yes, in fact, Jim Sauter in that number 5 is going to come into the pits. I wonder whether he ticked the wall on that spin or whether or not a tire's going down on him that caused it, but no matter. The Wisconsin driver, Jim Sauter, who has done some Grand National stock car racing and has done very, very well in that league, is now into the pits. In fact, it is probably a tire, maybe the right front, that caused that difficulty or that near spin by Jim Sauter. So this is a tough break for him because he falls way back under the green flag as well, just like we saw Bob Strait do earlier.
Well, if you've got a tire problem on this racetrack, you best get to the pits and get it solved because you're a hazard to yourself and others. This is just not a racetrack you can take any chances.
Right, Steve, and right now it's clean and green for this man, Mike Eddy, well out in the lead. No real problems for him. Butch Miller's still back there, but now he's going to put a move on Bob Strait, his early rival in this race, but Strait, of course, falling back because of that tire problem.
And Brock coming into the pits, number 81, Harold Fair. Harold led this race at one time, was 5th when he came into the pits, and there's a problem with this automobile. Pitting under green here is going to cost him a lot of positions. Now, he's trying to communicate to the crew just what that problem is. One crew member with a water can has handed some steam coming out of the radiator, so you'd have to think that it is overheating.
Well, Steve, you saw one of the crewmen pull some paper off the nose of the automobile. It's possible that the air passages were blocked. They're pretty small in that car anyway, and he may have just overheated the engine. Temperature gauge, just the needle popped up, and Harold Fair came into the pits. But then again, it could be a broken water line or a blown head gasket or whatever. But nonetheless, again, a green flag stop for him, put off the car, and that's going to put him way, way back. Tough break for Harold Fair, who ran so well, as you said, got that car into the lead for a while. And there's another man, Alan Kawicki. More problems. He was in 4th place. We saw him spin, recover beautifully, come back in, make a stop. He's been up and down all day long, and now they're going to change that right side rubber, and a lot of time being lost for him as well. This, as we said, green flag pit stops for both Fair and for Kawicki.
And Harold Fair, car number 81, still in the pit area. The hood is up. There is a chance that he is done for the day, Brock. He's still sitting in the car hoping the crew is going to figure out some miracle.
Well, I'm sure, Steve, that wasn't just a little piece of paper on the nose of the car. It had to be something more serious than that. You don't overheat the car that badly with that little bit of a paper. I bet it's a head gasket or perhaps a water line.
Well, Harold Fair apparently throwing in the towel, Brock. The helmet is off. The radio's been disconnected. So it's a crispy little machine sitting in the pit area that is out of the race. Harold Fair, overheating problems. No problems for Mike Eddy. Car number 88 just rocking and rolling.
He sure is. He's got himself a clear racetrack, and by now, all the other drivers have pretty well established that this guy is the fastest man on the racetrack, and they're moving out of the way for him. There's a certain familiarity that develops with the slower drivers. They know when he's coming, and they're getting out of his way, so he really doesn't have any problems unless somebody else gets out of shape and takes him out with him. Otherwise, the car is handling so well that Eddy is just dominating this event right now.
And Eddy is so smooth. He appears to be able to think about a half a lap ahead of himself, just anticipating where the lap cars are, where the problems may be. So confident in the way his car handles that he can do just about anything he wants anywhere on the racetrack. Just a marvelous performance by man and machine here so far in the Winchester 400. Mike Eddy continuing to lead here and lead with style. Coming out of the car is Harold Fair, and Brock Yates is down in the pits to talk to him.
Harold Fair out of the car after a really very hard drive, a sensational drive all afternoon. Harold, sorry you're out. What's the problem?
It was overheating, got some paper in the front of it earlier, and it got in there again, and it just got too hot.
Boy, you were running real strong right with the leaders all day.
I know.
Sorry you're out. Very disappointed. Harold Fair goes over to examine the damage. Car 81, he's out for the afternoon.
Boy, that's tough to swallow, being put out of an important race like this by some hot dog wrappers that floated out of the grandstands. But that is the story with Harold Fair, and that leaves only 3 cars on the lead lap. Number 88, Mike Eddy, of course, Butch Miller in car number 52, still out there really doing a good job, moving up from the 12th spot, and Dick Trickle, the last of the 3 that remain on the lead lap. Trickle in car number 99. But that's all you need when you've got drivers and machines of this caliber. 3 cars can give you one heck of a shootout on an exciting, high-bank, half-mile racetrack like this. We'll be back to Winchester.
We're at the high banks of Winchester, Indiana, the 400. That's Dick Trickle. I'm Brock Yates, along with Steve Evans, Ed Bruce down in Nashville, Tennessee, as we see the laps unfold here. And Dick Trickle now up in 3rd place, Steve. He's been among the leaders all day long. Remember, he started on the pole.
But just hasn't had the horsepower, it would appear to me, Brock, anyway, to get out there and run with Mike Eddy. Car's handling nicely, but just maybe down 50 horsepower.
Yeah, Steve, it's been a little bit off its song all afternoon. He started, as we said, up front, hung with the leaders all day, but just hasn't been able to challenge for the lead in the way Trickle likes to do.
Well, the important thing for Trickle is to stay on the lead lap, and he is doing that. And slowing right here is car number 27. That is Muttley Kurkowski's Camaro.
From Perry, Ohio, Muttley slows down and just kind of coasts on into the pits. It looks like he's finished for the day. It has brought out the yellow here at Winchester, so that once again is going to bring a bunch of the leaders into the pits for routine stops, and the first one in is Butch Miller. Right behind him comes Dick Trickle, and those guys, remember, are in 2nd and 3rd spot, so this is going to be an interesting little race that the pit crews have here to see who gets out first. First guy out, Steve, will be in 2nd place. Look at this.
Well, that is Rusty Wallace, car number 66, who came in, found his pit stop was occupied, and Rusty charged right back out on the racetrack again. He'll come back and try to find some room in this very crowded pit lane.
Absolutely. A lot of congestion down there as the crew works on both Miller's car and Trickle's car. These guys just rushing because there's a lot at stake here. Boy, there's a big man working that jack, Steve, because they got to change tires on Trickle's car. He's getting a little drink of water. They're changing left side tires on Butch Miller's car as well. This is an interesting race. Trickle, look at that. Boy, there is one tough competitor. He just can't wait to get started. And Butch Miller underway first. Trickle follows him, so the standings don't change. 2nd and 3rd hold under caution. Now, let's go down to Nashville and Ed Bruce.
Thank you, Brock. Cuckoo, there seems to be a certain mystique about the old short tracks, the dirt tracks. It was a pretty valuable training ground, too, wasn't it?
I feel like, really, the short tracks and the dirt track is one of your good ways to come up. Of course, see, you're under more physical pressure, mental pressure, the traffic. You're in a lot of traffic on the short track, and you got to learn to pace on the outside. Watch for the wrecks, especially with that much traffic out there. Yeah.
There wasn't as much of a line on the old dirt tracks, was it?
No. Of course, it's kind of, give them a good slide. They had quicker stern on the dirt track cars than you do asphalt cars. You have to stay more smoother.
You see a lot of those old hands that started out on dirt tracks finishing up there in that top 10 these days, too, don't you?
That's right. And you might out-qualify them, but when that race is over, the old hand's going to be there.
Cuckoo Marlin, thanks for talking to us. It's been a pleasure. Let's go back to Brock and Steve at the Winchester 400.
Thank you, Ed. We enjoyed Cuckoo's reminiscences. And coming into the pits under yellow is the leader, Mike Eddy, car number 88, Brock. Eddie taking advantage of that yellow flag, but still, it's going to cost him the lead, and he again will have to charge from behind.
Well, Stevie's been doing it all afternoon, and certainly ought to be familiar with that tactic. The crew is going to take a little bit of extra time here and change all 4 tires. Fresh rubber on all 4 corners of that number 88, and that should, if in anything, make the car work even better than it has been. And boy, I'll tell you what, the way that chassis is working right now, he could probably run on snow tires out here and do well.
And also, Brock, with Eddie coming in, it means that all 3 of our contenders, all 3 of those cars on the lead lap, Butch Miller, Dick Trickle, and Mike Eddy, have made what should be their last pit stop.
Right, Steve. It could be that they'll make one last stop to top off the tank or maybe change the right side rubber, but presumably if it stays green, that was the last time we see the leaders make their pit stops. Butch Miller now out front. Dick Trickle up there in second place. Mike Eddy right there in third and about to make another one of his patented charges toward the lead. Okay, so there's your leader, Butch Miller, leading him down into turn number 1. Right behind him comes number 99, Dick Trickle, and you can see him weaving around trying to get that fresh rubber warmed up. Earlier, Steve Evans had a chance to talk to this legendary stock car driver.
Dick, how is it that the winningest short track driver in the history of racing has not been able to win here at Winchester, the 400 anyway?
Well, I've had mechanical problems, been very competitive quite a few of the races, and just had a mechanical problem or a wreck or whatever took me out, and this was never my day. You know, I've run well every time and been competitive, and I think maybe this is my year.
Well, it's possible. He's right up there in second place behind Butch Miller, and there you see him in that white and orange number 99 going down on the outside, up high on the back straight to stay up among the leaders. Right behind him is Bob Strait, who was a factor in this race for quite a while, but has fallen well back. So Dick Trickle still hopes very high to win his first Winchester 400. I'll tell you, Steve, he's won everything else. This could be the last notch he needs in his gun to fill out just an absolutely incredible career of stock car racing.
And Brock, as the fans were filing in before the race this morning, there were an awful lot of them wearing Dick Trickle buttons, Dick Trickle hats, T-shirts. He's got a mob of people supporting him here in the grandstands.
Sure does. He's popular everywhere. A guy that spends a lot of time with the fans and works hard to maintain their loyalty, as we see Butch Miller in that number 52. And there's Rusty Wallace going down low. Remember, Wallace is in 5th place. A couple of opportune yellow flags could get Wallace back up on the lead lap, and who's to know? He's won this thing once before, and history could repeat itself.
Well, Wallace right now looking for any opening to get by Butch Miller, because that would take him yet another lap towards the lead.
Well, he's 2 laps down. If he can squeeze past the leader right here, it'll put him 1 lap down, and then, of course, another pit stop or a caution, and who's to know? Right there is Rusty Wallace. The car seems to be working real well right now, Steve.
It's been in the pits enough, Brock, to have a chance to find all of the problems with 66. And when we say 1 lap down, what are we talking, 13 seconds?
13 or 14 seconds, something like that. Under 15 under the worst of conditions and heavy traffic as they just whistle around this high bank half mile here in the farmlands of central Indiana. Beautiful, beautiful little racetrack. We said earlier, one of the oldest in history. And look at this. Mike Eddy, wow, who can forget him? He's been there all day long. Now he's about to go past Bob Strait, who's fallen all the way back to 11th place. But I think Eddy is so confident in the way the car's working that he's just being cautious, just steadily reeling in the 2 leaders, Trickle and Miller.
Well, he's got fresh tires on all 4 corners, a full load of fuel. He knows in his mind exactly how many laps are left and what he has to do. His next objective has to be the man right in front of him. That's Dick Trickle. Mike Eddy wants Trickle's 2nd position, and he's going to get it on the outside.
Boy, it looks like he's just running another class, doesn't it? I mean, all that horsepower just ran right past Dick Trickle, and when you do that, you've achieved something. So it implies either that Trickle's slowing down a little bit, or that Mike Eddy has just got the hammer down all the way. The next objective, that red and white car there, that number 52, that's the target for today for Mike Eddy. He's the leader, Butch Miller, but who's to know how long he can hold on. Butch just driving his heart out here, doing a fine, fine job. Remember, he started well back, worked his way up among the leaders, and through some good pit work by his crew, has been able to hold on. Look at this, Steve.
Dick Trickle, car number 99. The White Knight has got problems, Brock. He is slowing. He is pulling into the pit area. So Dick Trickle, this is disastrous for him. This late in the race, under green, he is losing lap after lap with this particular pit stop.
Well, I thought that Mike Eddy blew him off awfully easily. That was a little bit of a surprise, and it must be that the engine was just going away on him. The crew's got the hood up, and they're peaking, but I've got a feeling, yeah, there is a crewman saying, shut her down, Dick. No way, babe. Not today. So yet again, the old mechanical bugaboo catches up with Dick Trickle here in the Winchester 400. I'll bet for a while he thought it might be his day, Steve.
Well, he has been spider bit in this case. Here's 52. That's your leader, Butch Miller, moving right along. But right behind him, dogging his tracks, is Mike Eddy, who has now moved into the 2nd spot. We'll be back to the high banks of Winchester after this. We are seeing no holds barred short track stock car racing here in the Winchester 400 in Winchester, Indiana. I'm Steve Evans for Brock Yates and Ed Bruce, and there's your leader, Butch Miller in car number 52. But right behind him, the only car on the same lap, Mike Eddy, car number 88, who has led more laps in this race than any other driver and wants to lead some more. Brock Yates is in the pits to find out what happened to Dick Trickle.
Did you pick up any paper on the racetrack? A lot of guys were.
I don't know, something must have happened. I just got a leak somewhere because I was running cool the first half of the race, and then all of a sudden I quit running cool, so he must have started using up some water and then went dead.
Sorry you're out. Good job.
Well, with their 9.5 to 1 compression and small carburetors, the engines are very reliable, but apparently some attention should be paid to the cooling systems on these automobiles because a number of cars have gone out with overheating problems. And here comes another car into the pits, possibly with overheating problems. That is number 66, Rusty Wallace, who has done just a super job of coming back from some early difficulties. And again, yes, we have an engine that is overheated and probably will put him out of the race, Brock.
Well, it's a real mystery. It could be the nature of the racetrack with these high banks that's causing the overheating problems with all these leaders, or maybe it's the blowing waste paper, as you said earlier. But no matter, we sure have had a rash of hot engines here at Winchester. And there's problems at the head of the front straightaway. That is car number 48, Bob Sensibo. Last we saw him, Mark Martin had taken over, but now Bob's back in his own car again, and somehow has come to a halt right there at the head of the straight. And there it is, the yellow flag out once again while they clear away the automobile. It doesn't look like anything's broken on the car, but in the meantime, Rusty Wallace gets a break because the caution's out, and that means he's not going to lose as many laps as he otherwise might have, while his crew frantically works to try to maybe get that car back into the race.
Red-headed, red-suited Rusty Wallace himself is out from behind the wheel and participating in the repairs, trying to give the crew a hand here. And Brock, look at this. The second place driver, number 88, Mike Eddy, is in the pits. You called this one, my friend. You said if there was a yellow, he might come back just to make sure everything's right.
Well, this shows a lot of confidence on his part to put on some fresh rubber on the right side. He was catching Miller, but this will make it even more inevitable, I suppose, because I don't think Butch is going to make the stop. So in fact, they're going to change all 4 tires once again. That's interesting. It's a question of whether or not he's having handling problems and heavy tire wear, or else it's just a big insurance policy. No matter, it's going to make for an interesting shootout when the green flag does drop between Miller and Mike Eddy.
Well, apparently, Brock, the temperature has risen, the track is much hotter and harder on tires here in the latter stages of this race. And there is the leader, number 52, Butch Miller. You can bet he's got his eye on what's going on with Mike Eddy as Eddy falls into the field in the number 2 spot. We have got some kind of a shootout coming.
The yellow is out in the latter stages of the Winchester 400, and it's boiled down to 2 men. Butch Miller, Mike Eddy, both on the same lap. Let's go to Steve Evans with Willie Menning, Mike Eddy's crew chief, in the pits.
Well, that was a brilliant last stop. Your crew just perfect.
Well, we've had problems here on the last 150 laps with our right front tires, or the rubber's pulling off of them. We wasn't set up to put this last set of tires on, and so we borrowed a set off of Bob Seniger, who fell out, and so we got his tires on right now. So we hope that we can catch Miller now with 20 laps to go.
Well, Mike's in charge. If anybody can do it, he can.
That's right.
Okay, good luck.
Well, he's going to get his chance right now because the green is waving at Winchester, and here comes Butch Miller, and I'll tell you what, he's got a tiger on his tail in the form of Mike Eddy, who right now goes up high, trying to get past Jim Sauter, who's a lap down in 3rd place, and the way is now clear. There is Eddy, and right in front of him comes Butch Miller, your leader, Steve Evans.
Only about 150 feet of racetrack separate Mike Eddy from again leading this race. And don't you know, the real estate salesman from Michigan, Butch Miller, has got the pedal down just as hard as he can, Brock. But is it going to be enough to hold off Eddy? I don't think so.
Boy, I'll tell you what, the distance just keeps narrowing as these laps unfold, and look at Eddy just barreling up on him as they come down the back straightaway. Butch Miller doing his best to hold on, but it's inevitable. It just seems to be impossible to hold off Mike Eddy here on this half mile today.
With the tire problems, however, that Eddy has been having, you heard Willie, his crew chief, tell us about that. Eddy, once he gets the lead, as he has just done, may back it down a little bit, Brock, and just try to win this thing now.
Right. He's been frying that right front tire, as Manning said, so he may not, as you say, try to put out any big exhibitions of speed. And in fact, it looks like he has kind of settled it down. He's got himself about a 5 or 6 car length lead over the second place Butch Miller, and may not be in a whole big hurry to extend that.
Yeah, he's letting Miller stay a bit closer to him than he did in the early stages of this race.
Well, it would make sense because Mike Eddy is a very heady race driver. He's won a lot of races in ASA, and in fact has won here as well on Winchester fabled banks over the years, and he's not going to do anything dumb at this point in the race.
Especially when he's only got one other car on the same lap with him. That, of course, is Butch Miller. Running in the third spot is Jim Souter in car number 5, but Souter is 2 laps down, even though he's as far up in the field as third. What Eddie is going to have to do now, Brock, is not let anybody else rain on his parade. Here at Winchester, another car can blow a tire, get into the wall, and take you right out of it.
Absolutely, that's happened a lot. That's one of the big hazards in short track stock car racing, and it can happen at any moment, especially near the later stages of the race when the race cars start to get really tired and parts start to break. And back in 4th place, one of the famed Seneca racing family, that's Terry Seneca in the number 40 car. He's about 7 laps back, though, and he's just kind of hanging on back there, hoping this thing will get over with. Not much chance to unreel yourself from a 7-lap disadvantage on a half-mile racetrack.
And right now, Mike Eddy has changed from an offensive driver to a defensive driver, Brock, just trying to stay away from the walls and all that traffic.
Yeah, he's got himself about 10 car lengths on Butch Miller back there in second. Doesn't seem to be much interested in extending that lead. Just staying up high. Everybody's getting out of his way now. They know that he's the class of the field at this point, so nobody's going to try to contest him.
How would you like to deal with Mike Eddy if you accidentally took him out of the race at this stage? I mean, after the race. How would you like to deal with him?
He'd probably throw that race car at you. He's a big, strong man. All right, the number 0 of Camaro there, that white automobile, that's Tom Jones. He's out of Northbrook, Illinois. He's way back in 5th place, 16 laps off the pace, but that's still a good job for Tom. He started in 25th spot, Steve, and worked his way up through the field.
And 5th pays a lot more than 25th, Brock, so he'll be well rewarded, as will this man, Mike Eddy, if he can just hang on and stay out of trouble on these 36-degree banks of the track they call the Black Widow.
So far, it's been a perfect drive for him all day long. Lots of power, lots of handling, lots of poise, and John Potts, the starter, waves that white flag, and that says 1/2 mile to the victory lane.
So Mike Eddy in the short back straight headed into turn number 3. Eddy taking a very safe middle of the track line. This is the final lap. Mike Eddy will win the Winchester 400, and what a happy crew.
And well, they should be, Steve. Their pit stops were perfect. They made a bunch of tire changes to keep him in the lead. Alan Kulwicki gave him a scare when he spun right in front of him in the middle of the race, and Butch Miller kept the pressure on him all day long. A fine job by both these drivers, in fact, the whole field here at Winchester. We'll talk to this man, the winner, Mike Eddy, after this.
One happy young man, Mike Eddy, unhooks his steering wheel. One last wipe of the old cloth, and out he comes. A glass of water here. Mike, super job. Congratulations, Mike. Just had all kinds of strength, handling, horsepower. Everything seemed to work your way today.
Yeah, everything went. You couldn't ask for it to go any smoother. I've had races like this in the bag before, and the bag busted, and at least it held together this time.
Mike, tell me, were you concerned that you couldn't run down Miller after that last caution?
Well, the laps keep running down. You know, we only had like 18 laps to go, but I figured he was on his used tires and I had new ones, and they're just so much faster that I knew I could catch him.
Did you had a tire going down? Is that why you made the stop, or was it just precaution?
We've been good for 100 laps all day long on right front tires, and I started putting on green ones with stickers, and they started coming apart, so I had to make sure I changed them plenty often.
Okay, congratulations. Super job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, Mike Eddy looks pretty refreshed, doesn't he, for a guy who just drove 200 miles on a 36-degree banked half mile. Butch Miller in the 2nd spot. Jim Souter picks up 3rd. Terry Seneca in the 4th spot, and Tom Jones rounds out the top 5. Average speed a little over 75 miles an hour. Just 12 caution flags, and that's not bad for this treacherous place. And 12 exciting lead changes. All in all, as good a short track stock car race as you could ask for. For Brock Yates and Ed Bruce, this is Steve Evans. So long from Winchester, Indiana.
The executive producer for American Sports Cavalcade is Harvey M. Pallage. Produced and directed by John B. Mullen. Promotional consideration provided for and a fee paid by the Style Auto World Championship Team, the nation's premier source of fast lane fashion. Style Auto, the champion's choice for the style of your life. The American Sports Cavalcade is a presentation